We live in a universe full of wonders and enigmas. Despite everything we have learned, there are questions that continue to defy science, logic, and human imagination. Today, you will travel with me through 60 unanswered questions. Some may seem simple, others could change everything. Are you ready? What existed before the Big Bang? According to science, the universe was born about 13,800,000,000 years ago, in an instant so brief and violent that time and space themselves emerged from nothing. But if time began there, what existed before? Some physicists say that asking what was before the Big Bang makes no sense, because time itself was born with it. There was no before. There was neither emptiness nor a cosmic clock to measure it. Others believe that the Big Bang was only one stage in an infinite cycle of expansion and contraction, a cosmic heartbeat where each universe dies to give birth to another. There's also the hypothesis of the inflationary multiverse, where each bubble of energy that bursts could create a new universe with its own laws. In that case, our universe would be only one among infinite others. And there are those who think that perhaps the universe never had a beginning, but has always existed, changing its form, transforming energy into matter and matter into energy, eternally. The truth is that, for now, we can only look back to the limit of what is observable. Beyond that frontier, what existed before the beginning remains a mystery, hidden behind the veil of time. Perhaps someday we will manage to see that wall, or perhaps never. Maybe the beginning of everything is the only secret the universe refuses to share. Why does something exist instead of nothing? Of all philosophical questions, this is one of the oldest and most perplexing. If absolute nothingness is the total absence of energy, matter, and time, how could something emerge from it? Quantum physics suggests that the vacuum is not truly empty. Within it, subatomic particles appear and disappear constantly, like fleeting sparks that arise from nothing. Perhaps our universe was born from one of those fluctuations, a simple cosmic accident that by chance did not vanish. But that explanation leads to another question. Why do the laws that allow this to happen exist? Why can the vacuum fluctuate? Some philosophers say that the universe exists because it could exist, others because it had to exist. And some believe that existence itself is inevitable, that absolute nothingness is impossible, because even the concept of nothing already implies the possibility of something. Perhaps the universe did not arise from nothing, but with nothing, like two sides of the same cosmic coin. A question so simple and so overwhelming that it has left even the greatest thinkers in silence. Does the universe have a limit, or is it infinite? When we look at the sky, it seems endless. However, what we see is only a small part of the observable universe, a sphere about 93 billion light-years in diameter. Beyond that, we do not know what exists. The universe could be finite, but without edges, like the surface of a sphere curving upon itself. If you could travel in a straight line for billions of years, you might return to the same point where you started without ever finding an end. It could also be infinite, extending without limit, with regions so distant that we will never be able to reach or see them. Some scientists even suggest that the universe could have a stranger shape, a multi-dimensional space where edges are not limits, but folds in reality. The most bewildering thing is that, even though we try to imagine it, the human mind was not made to conceive infinity. Every time we raise our eyes and think we see the entire sky, we are only observing a tiny fragment of the whole. The rest could be an eternity without end or beginning. Can we truly travel through time? Time seems to flow in only one direction, from past to future. But the laws of physics do not completely forbid it. Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time dilates with speed and gravity. The faster you move, the slower time passes for you. In theory, if you could travel near the speed of light, time for you would pass more slowly than for the rest of the universe. You would travel to the future, but going to the past is another matter. Some equations allow the existence of wormholes, tunnels that could connect different points in space and time. The problem is that opening one would require negative energy, something we still do not know how to produce. There is also the hypothesis of parallel universes. Every time you make a decision, the universe splits into infinite versions where every possibility occurs. If that were true, traveling to the past would not mean changing it, but creating a new timeline. Perhaps time is not a line, but a network, and each moment is an intersection where all possible stories cross. If we ever learn to walk through that network, we might not only travel, but understand the true meaning of time. Are there other universes besides ours? For centuries, humanity believed that only one universe existed. Today, some scientists suspect there could be infinite ones. The multiverse theory proposes that our cosmos is only one bubble within an immense foam of parallel realities. In each, the laws of physics could be different. In one, gravity might be stronger. In another, atoms might never form. And in yet another, life could have flourished in unimaginable ways. Some cosmologists believe that black holes could be portals to other universes, and that within each one, a new Big Bang might have been born. Others think that every human decision could generate a new reality where things happen differently. Perhaps in another universe, you are hearing this in another language, or in yet another, you never existed at all. The problem is that, for now, we have no way to prove it. Not yet. But if the universe has taught us anything, it is that the impossible is only a door we have not yet learned to open. What would happen if time ceased to exist? Everything we know depends on the passage of time. Stars are born and die, planets spin, mountains erode, people change. But if time stopped, everything would be frozen in an eternal instant. There would be no cause or effect, no before or after. Atoms would not vibrate, clocks would not tick, and consciousness could not process anything. Curiously, some quantum theories suggest that, at the deepest levels of reality, time might not exist as we understand it. It could be only an emergent illusion, a way our mind orders events. The universe, in its purest form, could be timeless, a motionless totality where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Perhaps what we call time is simply the way we perceive change. If time ceased to exist, the universe would not vanish. It would simply stop moving. And the most unsettling part is that we would never know it happened, because there would be no one left to tell it. Why do the laws of the universe seem so perfect for life? If a single physical constant were even slightly different, the universe would be a lifeless place. If gravity were a bit stronger, stars would collapse. If it were weaker, they would never have formed. If the charge of the electron varied by the smallest fraction, matter itself would be unstable. And yet, here we are. Some scientists call this the anthropic principle. The universe seems perfectly tuned to allow the existence of conscious beings capable of observing it. Others believe there is nothing special. We simply live in one of the few possible universes where conditions allowed it. But the adjustment is so precise that many see it as an almost metaphysical mystery. Is it pure coincidence? Or was the universe somehow programmed to generate life? Perhaps life is not a rarity, but an inevitable consequence of cosmic harmony. And maybe wherever there is balance, life appears, as if the universe were determined to know itself. What lies inside a black hole? Black holes are the most extreme places in the universe. They are regions where gravity is so intense that nothing can escape, not even light. But what happens inside? At the center of a black hole, the known laws of physics collapse. Matter compresses to infinite density, forming what is called a singularity. There, space and time cease to make sense. Some physicists believe that the interior of a black hole could connect to another point in the universe, or even to another universe. Others suggest that the information entering does not vanish, but remains trapped and encoded on its surface, like a quantum fingerprint. Stephen Hawking proposed that black holes emit faint radiation, meaning they can evaporate over time. If that is true, where does everything they swallow go? Does it truly disappear, or is it reborn in another cosmos? Perhaps, inside every black hole, there exists the seed of a new universe waiting to be born, from the collapse of another. Does space have a real center? When the universe expands, it does not do so from a specific point, but in all directions at once. That means that from any location, it seems that everything is moving away from you. So, where is the center? The most astonishing answer is that there is none. Every point in the universe is, in a way, the center of everything. The expansion does not occur in space. Space itself is what expands. There are no edges, no up or down, and no central point from which everything grows. So when you look at the sky and see galaxies receding, you are not at the margins of the cosmos. You are at the very heart of its expansion. You, I, all of us, are at the center of the observable universe, and that changes everything. We are not distant spectators. We are part of its infinite breadth. Could we ever see the complete past of the universe? When we observe a distant star, we see its light as it was millions or billions of years ago. Looking at the sky is looking back in time. The most powerful telescopes, like the James Webb, have managed to capture the light of the first galaxies, born when the universe was only a few 100 million years old. But beyond a certain point, we find a wall of darkness, the so-called cosmic microwave background, the oldest light that exists, the fossil echo of the Big Bang. Before that, the universe was so dense and hot that light could not escape. Everything was an impenetrable fog of particles. Beyond that frontier, the very beginning remains hidden. However, each new observation brings us a little closer to that primordial moment. Perhaps someday we will see beyond the veil and discover that the universe not only has a past, but a living memory that continues to expand with us. And as we keep looking toward the stars, we remember that sometimes the greatest questions are not out there, but within us. Because the mystery of the universe does not only dwell in infinite space, but also in the mind that dares to contemplate it. How did life begin exactly? For centuries, humans have tried to answer this question. We know that about 4 billion years ago, Earth was a glowing chaos. Boiling oceans, electrical storms, active volcanoes, and a toxic atmosphere made of methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. And yet, at some point in that hostile landscape, something extraordinary happened. Non-living matter gave rise to the first cell. How did that occur? Some scientists believe it was the result of a series of chemical reactions in the primordial oceans, known as the prebiotic soup. There, among simple molecules, heat, lightning, and minerals catalyzed processes that formed more complex compounds, such as amino acids and nucleic acids, the basic components of life. Others propose that life may have arrived from space on meteorites carrying organic matter. This hypothesis is called panspermia. There is also the idea that life did not arise by chance, but as an inevitable consequence of the laws of nature, a logical step in the universe's evolution toward complexity. And, of course, some believe that the spark of life may have been something more than chemistry, something that escapes our formulas and equations. The truth is that no one knows exactly how it happened. The boundary between the inert and the living remains one of the greatest mysteries of the cosmos. Perhaps life did not begin in a single point, but in many. Perhaps Earth was only one of several places where the universe decided to awaken. What truly defines whether something is alive? We say something is alive if it grows, breathes, reproduces, and dies, but that definition falls apart when we observe certain cases. A virus, for example, does not meet all those conditions. It cannot reproduce on its own, but when it comes into contact with a cell, it activates, multiplies, and adapts. So, is it alive or not? There are bacteria capable of entering a total state of hibernation for thousands of years and returning to activity when conditions are right. And there are crystals that grow, reproduce, and even evolve into increasingly complex patterns, although they lack metabolism. Perhaps being alive is not an absolute condition, but a gradual process. Some scientists define life as a system that self-regulates and transmits genetic information. But even that may change when we discover new forms of existence. Imagine a conscious artificial intelligence, or a silicon-based life form on another planet. Would we say it is alive? Perhaps life is a constant vibration, a dance between order and chaos, between being and ceasing to be. And deep down, everything, from a cell to a galaxy, participates in that universal pulse. Does the soul exist, or are we only matter? Science tells us that we're a collection of neurons, electrical impulses, and chemical reactions. Every thought, every emotion, every memory is an electrical discharge traveling through the brain. And yet, even scientists admit, there is something they cannot fully explain. Consciousness. Where does that sense of I come from? Why are we not simply biological machines without identity? For millennia, cultures around the world have spoken of the soul, an invisible essence that survives the body. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that the soul had several parts, some of which could travel between worlds. In Greek philosophy, Plato claimed that the soul was immortal and inhabited the body as a temporary passenger. In modern physics, some theorists have suggested that consciousness could be a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or energy. Perhaps the soul is not something separate from the body, but the invisible pattern that animates it, a network of information that somehow continues after death. And although we cannot measure or weigh it, we all feel it when we watch a sunset, when we love, or when we ask ourselves why we exist. Maybe the soul is precisely that, the question that cannot be extinguished. Why do we sleep and dream? We spend 1/3 of our lives asleep. That means that if we live 90 years, we would have slept 30. And yet, we do not know with certainty why we do it. Sleeping restores the body, repairs tissues, strengthens the immune system, and consolidates memory. But dreams go beyond biology. During dreams, the brain creates entire worlds. We can see faces we've never known, travel to places that do not exist, or relive moments from the past, altered by imagination. Some scientists believe that dreams are a way for the brain to process emotions and organize the information accumulated during the day. But there are more intriguing theories. Carl Jung, for example, thought that dreams were the language of the unconscious, symbolic messages the soul sends to guide us. And other ancient cultures believed that when we sleep, the spirit temporarily leaves the body to visit other planes of existence. Perhaps dreams are a release valve for the mind, or perhaps a connection to parallel realities. The truth is that upon waking, something within us changes. Sleeping is turning off the body. Dreaming is turning on the soul. What exactly happens when we die? When the heart stops beating and the brain shuts down, everything should end. And yet, millions of testimonies claim to have felt something more. A bright light, a deep peace, a sensation of leaving the body and observing it from above. These experiences are known as near-death experiences. Science explains them as chemical reactions in the brain in its final moments. Endorphin release, lack of oxygen, chaotic neural activity. But the curious thing is that many accounts coincide, even among people from different cultures with no contact between them. Some clinically dead patients describe details of the operating room that later prove accurate. Are they shared hallucinations or glimpses of another reality? No one has returned with definitive answers. Death remains the greatest mystery of all. Perhaps it is a transition, not an end, a door opening towards something we cannot conceive from this side. And maybe, when we cross that threshold, we discover that we'll never stopped existing. We only changed form. Could life exist without water? On Earth, water is essential. It regulates temperature, dissolves nutrients, and enables the chemical reactions that sustain life. But the universe is vast, and there are places where water is an impossible luxury. On Titan, a moon of Saturn, it rains liquid methane. On Venus, the clouds are made of sulfuric acid. And yet, some scientists believe life could adapt to those environments. There could be organisms that breathe ammonia or use methane instead of water to survive. It has even been proposed that silicon-based life forms could exist, since silicon is abundant and can form stable structures similar to those of carbon. In fact, on Earth, there are extremophile bacteria capable of living in places where it would seem impossible. Inside volcanoes, under layers of ice, or in acid lakes. If that happens here, what could not happen on another planet? Perhaps the universe is full of life, but so different from ours that we simply do not know how to recognize it. Maybe, right now, beings that do not need water, oxygen, or even flesh and bone to exist are observing us. Are we alone in the universe? Every night, the sky lights up with thousands of stars. We know that almost all of them have planets, and many of those worlds could be habitable. Probability says we are not alone, and yet the silence is absolute. This enigma is known as the Fermi paradox. If the universe is full of life, where is everyone? Some scientists think intelligent civilizations are rare and fragile, destroying themselves before they can communicate. Others believe the distances are so immense that their signals have not yet reached us. There is also the possibility that we're being observed without knowing it as part of a cosmic experiment. Or perhaps the universe is full of life, but in forms so different that we would never recognize them. The most unsettling idea is the opposite, that we truly are alone. And if that were true, human existence would be even more astonishing, because it would mean that among trillions of stars, only one small blue planet managed to look up at the sky and wonder who else might be out there. Is there a purpose to life? Every species fights to survive, adapt, and perpetuate itself. But beyond that, why do we exist? Is there a universal purpose, or are we only here by chance? From biology, it's said that the goal of life is to replicate, to maintain the cycle. But that explanation leaves a void. Humans need a why, a meaning that goes beyond survival. Some find purpose in love, others in creation, others in the search for knowledge, and some believe that life has no given purpose, but that each person builds their own through their decisions. Perhaps the universe did not give us a meaning because it wanted us to invent one. Living in that case would be the purest form of asking, learning, exploring, and creating. Maybe there's no final answer, and the search itself is the purpose. Because curiosity is what makes us human. And life may be the most beautiful question ever asked. Why do we age? Our bodies are designed to be born, grow, and sooner or later deteriorate. Cells divide, the telomeres that protect DNA shorten, and time leaves its mark. But why were we not made to last longer? Some scientists believe aging is an evolutionary strategy. If everyone were immortal, there would be no room for the new. Life needs constant renewal. Others think aging is simply an inevitable consequence of biology. Our bodies were never designed to last indefinitely, only long enough to reproduce. However, there are creatures that seem to defy time. The jellyfish Turritopsis dohrnii, for example, can reverse its aging and return to a juvenile state. Some species of turtles and whales live more than 2 centuries. Could humans achieve something similar? Modern science is already studying how to repair DNA and regenerate tissues to extend life. But in the end, perhaps aging is not a mistake, but a lesson, because it reminds us that everything changes and that the beauty of existing lies in knowing that nothing lasts forever. What does it truly mean to be conscious? We know that we think, feel, and exist, but what is consciousness? It is not something that can be touched or measured, but it is there, observing, interpreting, remembering. Some scientists say it is the result of the brain's complexity, but others believe that consciousness could be a fundamental property of the universe, as basic as energy or space. If that were true, everything would have some degree of consciousness. From atoms to galaxies, a rock, a plant, or a star could have a primitive form of perception. Perhaps consciousness is not inside us, but we are inside it. Each thought would be a wave in an ocean of cosmic consciousness. And if that is so, then when the universe observes us, it does so through our eyes, because we are one of the ways in which the cosmos tries to understand itself. Life, mind, and consciousness surround us, but we barely understand their surface. Every answer we find opens new questions. And perhaps that is the essence of the universe, a mystery that does not want to be solved, but experienced. Because if everything had an answer, perhaps curiosity, the spark that makes us human, would cease to exist. Why do we remember some moments and forget others? Our memory is selective, capricious, and sometimes treacherous. We remember a childhood melody, the smell of a house, a phrase spoken at a precise moment, and yet we forget entire conversations, whole days, even people. Science has discovered that the brain does not work like a recorder, but like a sculptor. Every time we remember something, we do not replay it, we rebuild it. Memories are stored in different regions of the brain, especially the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, and they are strengthened or weakened according to the emotion that accompanies them. That is why we clearly remember events filled with joy, fear, or sadness. Emotion acts as a biological seal that tells the brain, "This is important. Keep it." But even the strongest memories change over time. Every time we evoke them, we modify them without realizing it. Some neuroscientists believe that nothing is ever completely erased. What we call forgetting may be only a temporary disconnection, a way to protect ourselves from excess information or pain. Perhaps everything we have lived is still there, kept in the silent corners of the mind, waiting for a smell, a melody, or a dream that awakens it. Maybe forgetting is not losing, but letting rest. How far can human intelligence go? The human brain, with more than 80 billion neurons, is the most complex object known in the universe. Thanks to it, we have discovered cosmic laws, traveled into space, invented languages, and created art capable of moving generations. But we have also used that same intelligence for destruction, war, and manipulation. So, does a limit exist? Neuroscience suggests that human intelligence could expand much further. Every technological advance, every scientific or philosophical discovery, broadens the limits of what we are capable of understanding. Intelligence is not only biological. It now extends into the digital realm. The fusion between brain and machine, neural implants, and artificial intelligence could multiply our mental abilities in the coming decades. However, there is another deeper limit: perception. Perhaps there are things our mind simply cannot understand, just as a fish cannot conceive of the sky. Maybe the real question is not how far our intelligence can reach, but whether we will be wise in using it when we get there. Can we fully control our thoughts? Every day, thousands of thoughts cross our mind like an overflowing river. Some are pleasant, others disturbing, others senseless. We try to control them, but they seem to have a life of their own. Studies on meditation and neuroscience reveal that many of our thoughts are automatic, generated by neural networks that work without our conscious intervention. The brain predicts, reacts, and associates ideas constantly. Even when we think we are in silence, we can learn to observe those thoughts, but not to stop them completely. In fact, when we try to repress one, it often returns with more strength. Perhaps true control is not resisting them, but watching them pass without holding on. Like the sky watching the clouds without trying to change them. The mind thinks just as the heart beats. Balance lies in recognizing that we are not our thoughts. We are the consciousness that observes them. Why do we feel emotions like love or guilt? Emotions govern our lives more than logic. Love can inspire impossible feats, and guilt can sink us in silence for years. But why do we feel them? From a biological perspective, emotions arose to help us survive. Fear alerted us to danger. Anger pushed us to defend ourselves. And love kept us united as a species. Without these emotions, humans would not have cooperated, cared for our offspring, or formed societies. But there is something more. Emotions also connect us with the intangible, with that part of us that cannot be measured in neurons or hormones. Love is not only a chemical reaction between dopamine and oxytocin, it is also a spiritual experience. Guilt is not just a brain response to error. It is a moral compass that reminds us who we want to be. Perhaps emotions are the language of the soul, a way of communicating between who we are and who we aspire to be. And it is in that tension between reason and feeling that what we call humanity is born. What exactly is imagination? Imagination is the mind's secret laboratory. With it, we can create worlds that never existed, visualize the future, or reconstruct the past. It is the tool that allowed us to invent fire, the wheel, the gods, and dreams. When we imagine, we activate the same brain regions we use to remember. This is why the boundary between memory and fantasy is thinner than we think. Some scientists believe imagination is an essential evolutionary function. It allows us to foresee dangers, rehearse solutions, and project ourselves into possible scenarios. But imagination also has a mysterious dimension. Artists, scientists, and inventors often describe their ideas as if they came from outside, as if something whispered them. Perhaps imagining is more than inventing. Perhaps it is connecting with an invisible field of possibilities, where everything already exists, waiting to be discovered. After all, everything that is real today was once only an idea. Does free will exist, or is everything determined? We believe we freely decide what to do, what to think, whom to love. But science suggests that many of our decisions activate in the brain before we are aware of making them. This means the brain decides first, and we justify it afterward. So, are we truly free, or only following a biological program? The debate has divided philosophers and scientists for centuries. Some believe everything is determined. Each thought, each action, is the result of earlier causes we do not control. Others think free will exists, but within certain limits. We do not choose the cards life gives us, but we do choose how to play them. Perhaps freedom is not the absence of cause, but the awareness of choosing within it. Being free, in that case, would not be doing whatever we want, but understanding why we do it. And maybe that understanding is the first step toward real freedom. What happens inside the brain when we think? Every thought you have, a word, an image, an idea, is the result of an electrical impulse traveling between neurons at incredible speed. These connections form immense networks that change and adapt every second. However, although we can see the brain functioning through scans and measurements, we cannot observe the thought itself. We can detect the spark, but not the meaning. That gap between the physical and the mental remains a mystery. Where does biology end and consciousness begin? Some scientists believe that thinking is a form of simulation. The brain creates models of the world to anticipate it. Others suggest that the mind could be a quantum phenomenon, connecting physical reality with energy. Perhaps each thought is a reflection of the universe trying to understand itself. And perhaps when you think, you are not only using your brain, but participating in a much larger cosmic conversation. Why are humans the only ones who laugh? Laughter is one of the strangest and most beautiful expressions of the human being. We laugh when we're happy, nervous, or scared. We even laugh when there is no apparent reason. Scientists believe laughter has an evolutionary purpose. It arose as a form of communication before language. Laughing was a way of saying, "There is no danger," a signal of trust that strengthened group bonds. Today we know that laughter releases endorphins, reduces pain, and improves the immune system. It is literally natural medicine. But laughter also has an emotional and spiritual component. Sometimes we laugh in sad moments, as if the body knew that only humor can save us from the abyss. Perhaps laughter is the most human reminder of all, that life, even with its tragedies, remains deeply absurd and beautiful, and that as long as we can laugh, nothing is completely lost. Can we create an artificial mind with real consciousness? Machines already think, learn, create art, and write music, but can they feel? Artificial intelligence can imitate empathy, but there is no evidence that it experiences emotions or self-awareness. However, every advance brings us closer. Scientists are already working on neural networks that simulate human learning, and some believe that digital consciousness could arise spontaneously once a system reaches enough complexity. If that were to happen, would it still be a tool, or would it be a new form of life? The boundary between the biological and the artificial is fading, and maybe one day, a machine will not only answer questions, but will ask its own, "Who am I?" At that moment, we will have created something we can no longer call merely machine, but mind. What is happiness, and why is it so hard to maintain? We chase it throughout our lives, as if it were a destination at the end of the path. But happiness is not a place, nor a prize, nor a goal. It's a momentary state, a spark that appears and fades. Scientists have found that happiness does not depend only on what we have, but on how we interpret what we live. Hormones like dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin influence it, but so do our expectations. We want happiness to last, but it is designed to be fleeting. It is the balance between desire and calm. Some ancient philosophies, such as Stoicism or Buddhism, teach that happiness is not reached by pursuing it, but by accepting the present as it is. Perhaps happiness is not something we obtain, but something that appears when we stop looking for it. Because sometimes, being happy is simply breathing, looking at the sky, and feeling that, for an instant, everything is in its place. The human mind is a universe in itself, a cosmos of thoughts, memories, emotions, and ideas endlessly intertwined. Science can study its structure, but its essence remains a mystery. Perhaps we will never fully understand how we think, feel, or dream. And maybe that is what makes being human so fascinating, that we continue exploring the greatest of enigmas, ourselves. Why do animals have such complex behaviors without learning them? A bird builds a perfect nest without ever having seen one. A newborn turtle, tiny and fragile, emerges from the sand and instinctively knows which way to walk to reach the sea. Bees perform a precise dance to communicate the distance and direction of flowers, while dolphins call each other with a unique sound, as if each one had its own name. How can they do this without prior learning? Scientists call this instinctive or innate behavior, a set of genetically programmed actions that allow them to survive from the very first moment. In the DNA of every species, there are millions of years of accumulated experience, shaped by evolution. Every movement, every reflex, is the result of countless generations that learned, through success or failure, what worked and what did not. However, even with that explanation, there is something deeper that we do not fully understand. How can a simple chemical code contain such detailed instructions? How can a newly formed neuron know what it must do? Some researchers think that living beings inherit not only genes, but also behavioral patterns that function like a biological collective memory. Perhaps, in some way, nature preserves in each creature the wisdom of everything that came before. And maybe life does not need to learn from scratch, because it remembers. How do plants really communicate? At first glance, plants seem silent, motionless, solitary. But beneath the surface, a constant, slow, mysterious conversation unfolds. Through their roots, microscopic fungi called mycorrhiza create an underground communication network that connects trees, bushes, and flowers to each other. This system is known as the forest network. Through chemical and electrical signals, plants can warn one another about pests, drought, or disease. A tree attacked by insects releases volatile substances that alert its neighbors, so they can activate their chemical defenses. Others, larger and older, share nutrients with younger or weaker ones, as if the forest had its own system of solidarity. And although they do not have a brain, plants respond to pain, to their environment, and even show behaviors we could call decisions. Could that mean they feel, in some way we do not yet understand? Perhaps consciousness is not exclusive to animals, but a subtle property of all life. Nature speaks in a language that does not use words, but vibrations, signals, and chemistry. And we are only just beginning to learn how to listen. Why do colors exist that we cannot see? Our eyes perceive only a tiny strip of the electromagnetic spectrum, what we call visible light. But beyond that window, there are entire worlds of color and energy that our senses cannot reach. Bees, for example, see ultraviolet, which allows them to detect invisible patterns on flowers that guide them to nectar. Some snakes perceive infrared, literally seeing the heat of their prey. Mantis shrimp possess up to 16 types of color receptors, while we only have 3. That means they live in a universe of tones impossible for the human mind to imagine. And yet, we believe that what we see is the full reality. The truth is that we only see a very limited version of what exists. The world is not as we see it, but as our eyes and brain allow us to interpret it. Perhaps if we could see the entire spectrum, we would discover that the universe is not dark or empty, but an ocean of lights and frequencies dancing in silence. Reality is there, vibrating beyond the visible. we are only missing the right kind of sight. Why is gravity so weak compared to other forces? Gravity keeps the planets in their orbits, galaxies bound together, and our feet on the ground. And yet, it is inconceivably weak. A simple magnet can lift a metal paperclip against the entire gravity of the Earth. Why does such a fundamental force act so softly? No one knows for sure. Some physicists believe gravity is not weak, but that part of its strength dissipates into hidden dimensions. If that is true, we might be living only in a small portion of space-time, while most of gravity travels to places invisible to us. Others suggest that gravity is not really a force, but a curvature of space-time, an illusion created by the geometry of the universe. When a star or a planet deforms the space around it, what we feel as attraction is actually the result of moving across a curved surface. Whatever it is, gravity remains the silent link that connects everything to everything. And perhaps it's not only a physical law, but a cosmic metaphor, a force that, in some way, holds the fabric of existence together. What is in the darkest depths of the ocean? We know more about the surface of the moon than about the bottom of the sea. More than 80% of the ocean remains unexplored, hidden beneath darkness and crushing pressure. There, where light never reaches, life has found unimaginable ways to exist. There are creatures that produce their own light through bioluminescence, fish with transparent jaws, jellyfish that look like floating galaxies, and organisms that survive without oxygen, feeding on minerals that rise from the planet's interior. In those abysses, the rules change. Colors disappear, sound distorts, and the boundary between the living and the inert becomes blurry. Every year, new species are discovered, some so strange they seem to come from another world. Perhaps the true extraterrestrial creatures are not in the skies, but beneath our feet, in the abyssal depths of the ocean. There, where silence is absolute and life glows with its own light, reminding us that Earth still holds secrets far older than humanity itself. Why do bees know how to build perfect hexagons? Every honeycomb is a masterpiece of precision. Without blueprints, without calculations, without architects, bees create thousands of identical hexagonal cells, optimizing space and using the smallest amount of wax possible. The hexagonal shape is so efficient that even engineers use it in human structures. But the most astonishing thing is that bees do not learn it. They carry it engraved in their instinct. Scientists have confirmed that the hexagon is not only aesthetically perfect, but mathematically inevitable. When drops of liquid expand and touch each other, they form hexagonal patterns to occupy the maximum space with the minimum effort. Nature seems to prefer balance, symmetry, and economy. Perhaps the language of geometry is inscribed in the essence of the universe, and bees are simply interpreters of that cosmic harmony. Their honeycomb is more than a structure. It is a living expression of natural order. What would happen if Earth suddenly stopped spinning? Imagine that, in an instant, the planet stopped completely. Everything not firmly attached to the crust would be hurled forward at more than 1,000 miles per hour. The oceans would surge over the continents, the air would form devastating winds, and the land masses would fracture under their own inertia. One side of the planet would freeze in eternal night, while the other would burn under a motionless sun. Ocean currents would vanish, the climate would collapse, and life as we know it would cease to exist. But beyond the physical catastrophe, there is something even deeper. Earth's rotation regulates days, tides, sleep cycles, and seasons. It is the biological rhythm of the planet. If it stopped, we would lose not only movement, we would lose the notion of time. Perhaps in some way, Earth's rotation is the vital pulse of the planet, the heartbeat that marks the rhythm of life. How are the tallest mountains formed exactly? Mountains seem immovable, eternal, but they are the result of a constant dance between tectonic plates. When two continents collide, the crust folds and rises, creating mountain ranges that take millions of years to form. The Himalayas, for example, are still growing a few millimeters every year, pushed upward by the unseen force of India moving toward Eurasia. However, some rock formations show almost impossible patterns. Layers folded with mathematical precision, perfect symmetries, shapes that look sculpted with intention. Each mountain holds in its stones the history of ancient oceans, glaciers, and volcanoes. And although geology can explain the process, contemplating these structures awakens a sense of wonder that goes beyond science. Perhaps mountains are not just geological accidents, but natural monuments of time, silent witnesses to Earth's dreams of touching the sky. Why are volcanoes still active after thousands of years? Beneath Earth's surface, the primordial heat of the planet continues to burn. That inner fire, inherited from the planet's very birth, fuels the volcanoes that still roar and breathe. Magma forms when deep layers of the planet melt, releasing gases and energy that seek a way out. Volcanoes are natural escape valves, points where Earth exhales. But the mystery does not end there. Despite our planet being more than 4,500,000,000 years old, its core remains hot, nearly as hot as the surface of the sun. Where does that energy come from? Part of it is residual heat from the planet's formation. But another part comes from the decay of radioactive elements inside Earth. It is a fire that never goes out, only transforms. Perhaps volcanoes are the reminder that Earth is alive and that beneath its apparent stillness, it continues to beat with the force of a heart of fire. Are there limits to what nature can create? Wherever you look, life seems to reinvent itself endlessly. There are mushrooms that glow in the dark, fish that walk, plants that hunt insects, and jellyfish that rejuvenate until they become immortal. Nature has proven to be the greatest creativity laboratory in the universe. But does it have limits? Every time we think we have found them, life surprises us with something new. Perhaps nature does not create out of necessity, but out of curiosity. Every living form, every color, every pattern is an expression of a deeper impulse, the impulse to experiment. From the fractals in leaves to the patterns of a galaxy, there seems to be an intrinsic intelligence in matter. Maybe life is not an accident, but the way the universe plays at discovering itself. And in this infinite game, we too are one of its creations, trying to understand the art we are part of. Nature holds secrets that challenge logic and science. But perhaps the most astonishing thing is not what we have not yet discovered, but the simple fact that so much complexity, beauty, and meaning exists in everything around us. Because every plant, every animal, and every stone seem to say the same thing in their own language. I am here, and that alone is a miracle. What is consciousness really? We can measure brain activity, record electrical impulses, map brain regions, and reproduce their patterns through machines. And yet, consciousness remains an unfathomable mystery. We can observe what the brain does, but not what the brain is on the inside. Consciousness is not a function, but an experience. It is the silent voice that observes thoughts, the witness that says, "I am," the invisible point from which we perceive the world. But where does that feeling of existing come from? Some scientists explain it as an emergence. When the brain reaches a certain level of complexity, consciousness appears in the same way that heat arises from friction or sound from movement. Others, however, propose that consciousness is not generated but was already there, waiting for a vehicle through which to manifest. According to the hypothesis of panpsychism, all matter has some degree of experience. Every particle, every atom, every electron could possess a tiny spark of perception. If that is true, the entire universe would be alive, observing itself through its infinite forms. And perhaps what we call human consciousness is simply the way the cosmos, for an instant, becomes aware that it exists. Is there a theory that can explain everything? For more than a century, modern physics has been supported by two pillars: general relativity and quantum mechanics. The first explains the immense: planets, stars, galaxies, the fabric of space and time. The second describes the tiny: atoms, particles, invisible forces acting in the subatomic world. Both theories work with astonishing precision in their respective fields, but they are incompatible with one another. When we try to apply them together, the mathematics breaks down. Einstein dedicated the last years of his life to searching for a single equation that would unite all the forces of the universe in a common framework, a theory of everything. Since then, generations of scientists have continued that search. String theory, for example, suggests that all particles are actually tiny strings, vibrating in multiple dimensions. But there is still no definitive evidence. Perhaps the universe is too vast and ever-changing to be reduced to a single formula. Or perhaps the answer is not mathematical, but perceptual. Maybe the mistake lies in trying to fit everything into a system that only works from the human mind. And it is possible that the theory of everything already exists, written in every atom and every ray of light, waiting for us to learn the language in which it is composed. Why do mathematics describe the universe so well? Numbers are a human creation, yet they predict with precision the movements of planets, the orbits of stars, and the behavior of subatomic particles. How is it possible that a system invented by the mind works so perfectly in the real world? That question has puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries. Some argue that mathematics is an invention, a useful language to describe reality, but not reality itself. Others believe that mathematics exists independently as an eternal universal structure that we discover rather than create. Physicist Eugene Wigner called it the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. And equations do not only explain what we observe, they often predict things that do not yet exist, as happened with the discovery of the electron or the Higgs boson. It is as if the universe were written in a code that we are slowly deciphering. Perhaps numbers are the original language of the cosmos, a silent tongue that vibrates behind every form, color, or sound. And we, with every calculation and every theory, are simply trying to listen to its music. Could reality be a simulation? The idea seems taken from a movie, but more and more scientists and philosophers consider it possible. If an advanced civilization could create simulations so detailed that they reproduced reality at the quantum level, how could we distinguish them from true reality? Some computing experts state that with enough processing power, there would be no difference. In fact, every atom could be processed information. Every event, a line of code running in a system we do not understand. The universe would then have a digital architecture, governed by bits of information instead of physical atoms. Some theoretical physicists, including Nick Bostrom himself, have proposed that the probability of living in a simulation could be higher than the probability of living in an original universe. But if this were true, who would be the programmer? A higher being? Another civilization? Or the universe itself replicating in different levels of existence? Perhaps reality is not a machine, but a mind dreaming itself. And if all this were a simulation, maybe consciousness is the code that reveals that there is still something that cannot be copied, the ability to ask ourselves whether everything is real. How small can a particle become? For centuries, we've reduced matter into increasingly smaller fragments. First came molecules, then atoms, then protons, neutrons, quarks. And beyond that, scientists believe there may be even smaller structures. But is there a limit? Quantum physics suggests that when reaching the Planck scale, space and time stop behaving as we know them. Below that scale, reality dissolves into pure energy and probability. Some physicists think particles are not things, but vibrations in an invisible field. What we perceive as solid matter could actually be an illusion, a constant oscillation of energy that temporarily takes shape. The universe, then, would not be made of things, but of relationships, patterns, and rhythm. Perhaps the smallest particle is not an object, but a frequency. And if we could listen to it, maybe the entire universe would sound like a melody in perpetual creation. What is dark energy, and why does it accelerate the universe? In 1998, astronomers discovered something unexpected. The universe is not only expanding, it is expanding faster and faster. It was a total surprise, because gravity should be slowing down that expansion. To explain it, the existence of a mysterious repulsive force was proposed: dark energy. It is estimated to represent more than 60% of the entire cosmos, and yet we do not know what it is. It emits no light, it does not interact with matter, and it cannot be observed directly. Some think it might be a property of space itself, an inherent pressure in the vacuum that pushes everything outward. Others suggest it is a manifestation of hidden dimensions or a cosmological constant that changes with time. Whatever it is the reason galaxies move away from each other, as if the universe were breathing and still expanding after its birth. Perhaps dark energy is the force of the universe wanting to keep existing, a cosmic will that has not finished unfolding. And maybe that impulse to expand is not only outside, but also within us. How many dimensions really exist? We live in 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal one: length, width, height, and time. But the most advanced theories in physics, such as string theory or quantum gravity, suggest that there may be many more. Some speak of 10, 11, or even more hidden dimensions. We do not see them because they would be folded in on themselves at scales so tiny that our perception cannot reach them. But if they exist, they could explain the great mysteries of physics, gravity, dark matter, the very structure of space-time. Imagine it like a sheet of paper folded many times over itself. To a 2-dimensional being, that curvature would be invisible. We, 3-dimensional beings, might be just as blind to higher dimensions. Perhaps dreams, intuitions, or certain states of consciousness are glimpses of those other realities. And maybe what we call the universe is just a shadow of something infinitely larger and more complex. A multiverse of dimensions that coexist, superimposed in the same space, waiting to be discovered. Can we create life from scratch? Science has achieved unthinkable feats: cloning animals, reprogramming cells, manufacturing artificial DNA, and even creating synthetic organisms. But creating life from nothing, from inert matter, remains the ultimate challenge. To achieve it, it is not enough to assemble molecules. We must understand the principle that makes them awaken. What exactly is life? At what moment does a combination of atoms become something that feels, adapts, and evolves? Some scientists believe life is inevitable when the right conditions are met, an emergent property of the chemistry of the universe. Others insist there is something more, an invisible spark, an organizing energy that machines cannot reproduce. The line between what is created and what is born becomes increasingly thin. Perhaps we cannot create life because life is not created, it is revealed. And maybe, when we fully understand that mystery, we will discover that life did not begin here, but that the entire universe is a living being in expansion. Are there limits to what science can discover? Science has allowed us to look farther than ever, from the edges of the cosmos to the interior of the atom. But even with all its power, there are invisible frontiers. There are phenomena we may never be able to observe, such as what happens beyond the horizon of a black hole or before the birth of time. And beyond technical limits, there are cognitive limits. The human mind may not be designed to understand certain concepts. Just as a fish cannot imagine fire, there may be truths our brain will never be able to process. Some scientists accept that there will always be mysteries beyond our reach. But that limitation is not a defeat. It's the impulse that keeps the search alive. Because knowledge is not about reaching an end, but about expanding the frontier a little more each day. Science does not extinguish mystery. It illuminates it. What are we missing to fully understand reality? We have senses, instruments, and theories, but all are imperfect. We see only a small fraction of light, hear a tiny portion of sound, and perceive only a minimal slice of the spectrum of reality. What we call the real world might be just a limited representation within a much broader universe. Perhaps complete reality is right here, superimposed all around us, but our senses are not prepared to perceive it. Some philosophical and spiritual traditions maintain that ultimate reality is not grasped with the eyes or telescopes, but with consciousness. When we learn to look without biases and without filters, we discover that everything that exists is interconnected. Perhaps truth is not outside, in laboratories or galaxies, but inside, in the mind that asks. Because understanding reality may not be about accumulating knowledge, but about expanding perception. And in that sense, the universe does not need to be discovered. It needs to be remembered. Human knowledge has revealed thousands of secrets, but for every answer, new questions arise. And perhaps that is the deepest purpose of existence. That mystery never runs out. Because as long as there is something we do not understand, the universe will continue growing within us. And in the end, the most mysterious thing of all is that we can ask, what would happen if humanity disappeared today? Imagine that, in this very instant, all humans disappear without a trace. The lights of the world would flicker for a few more hours, and then silence. Cities without maintenance would begin to crumble. Within days, the streets would fill with animals searching for shelter. Airplanes would fall from the sky, power plants would shut down, and human noise would vanish forever. Within a few weeks, nature would begin its slow but inevitable reconquest. The wind would cover roads with dust, vegetation would break through the asphalt, and rivers would return to their ancient paths. Steel towers would rust, houses would collapse, and forests would advance over the cities. In a few hundred years, the visible traces of our civilization would be scarce. Jungles would cover monuments, the seas would erase ports, and animals that once feared humans would reign where we now dominate. But something would remain. The radio waves we once sent into space would continue traveling for eternity, crossing galaxies, carrying a silent message that once, in a corner of the universe, a species looked at the stars and wondered about its place among them. Perhaps, in a distant future, other intelligences will find those echoes and understand that we were not here forever, but we did leave traces of our wonder. Is there destiny, or is everything chance? Sometimes life seems guided by invisible threads, impossible coincidences, people who arrive at the exact right moment, events that change everything without warning. We like to think that destiny exists, a planned path, a purpose guiding us. But science tells us that the universe is governed by chance, probabilities, and small decisions that link together to form our story. Perhaps both are true, Chance opens the paths, but our choices determine which one we follow. Every word, every gesture, every thought creates a fork in the road. What we call destiny could simply be the sum of all the causes and effects we do not yet understand. And perhaps free will is not an illusion, but the way the universe expresses itself through us. If everything were written, there would be no surprise. And if everything were chance, there would be no meaning. Maybe destiny is the dance between both, the chaos that pushes us and the consciousness that decides how to move within it. Why do we always seek answers even when they do not exist? Since the moment humans looked up at the sky, they have felt the need to understand. Why does the sun shine? What lies beyond the horizon? Where do we come from? That insatiable curiosity saved us from ignorance and led us to create tools, science, art, and language. But it also condemned us to eternal restlessness. We cannot endure the unknown. We need to name, classify, understand. Even when there are no answers, we invent myths, religions, or theories to fill the void. Our brain is designed to search for patterns and causes, even where none exist. That's why we see faces in clouds and meaning in randomness. Perhaps that need is an essential part of what makes us human. Because mystery pushes us forward. We do not seek answers only out of curiosity, but because without them, we feel lost. And even when we do not find them, the act of asking connects us with the infinite. Maybe the purpose is not to reach the end of the path, but to keep walking while the question stays alive. What defines what is real? We believe we live in a solid and stable reality, but our senses capture only a fraction of the world. Color does not exist as such. It is an interpretation of the brain when receiving different wavelengths. Sound is vibration. Time is a relative perception. What for an insect or a bat is reality, for us is invisible or inaudible. So what is real? What we perceive? Or what exists even if we cannot detect it? Modern physics suggests that reality may be more a field of possibilities than a fixed structure. Each observer, each mind, creates its own version of the world from the information it can process. Perhaps reality is a collective work, a shared experience, or each consciousness contributes its perspective. And maybe what we call unreal is not false, just not yet understood. Because sometimes the invisible is more real than what we believe we touch. What will happen to the universe in 1 trillion years? The universe is approximately 13,800,000,000 years old, but its story has barely begun. In a few billion years, the last stars will begin to fade. Galaxies will drift so far apart that their lights will no longer be visible to each other. Black holes will consume what remains of matter and then, slowly, evaporate. It will be the beginning of a dark era. No light, no heat, no life. A silent and cold universe where entropy has reached its maximum level. But even then, energy will not disappear completely. Some physicists believe that quantum fluctuations could give rise to a new Big Bang. A tiny spark could ignite another universe, beginning the cosmic cycle again. Perhaps the universe does not die, but breathes. Each expansion and collapse would be a cosmic inhalation and exhalation, a heartbeat of the infinite. And in that eternal cycle, new forms of life and consciousness will again ask themselves, what existed before the beginning? Can anything last forever? Everything in the universe seems to have a beginning and an end. Stars are born, shine, and die. Mountains erode, oceans change, thoughts fade. Time seems like a river that spares nothing, and yet there are things that defy its passage. Love, ideas, music, numbers, concepts that, in some way, remain beyond matter. Energy is not destroyed either. It only transforms. Perhaps eternity is not a place, but a state, a moment in which something manages to exist outside change, even if only for an instant. Maybe nothing physical lasts forever, but everything leaves a trace. Every action, every thought, every atom continues its journey in a new form. And maybe that is true immortality, to continue, even if in another way of existing. Does perfection exist, or do we seek it without ever reaching it? From art to science, from a flower to an equation, humanity has searched for perfection. Symmetry, proportion, harmony, they seem like signs of something divine. But absolute perfection never allows itself to be captured. In nature, what we consider perfect always has a tiny imperfection, a variation that gives it life. The shell of a snail, the human face, a snowfall. None are identical, and that makes them unique. Perhaps perfection is an illusion created by our mind in its desire for order. Real beauty lies in the balance between chaos and form. Imperfection is the signature of existence, the proof that everything is in motion. If we reached total perfection, change would cease, and with it, life. Maybe the universe does not seek to be perfect, but possible. And we, by trying to improve what we love, keep alive the spark that makes it beautiful. Is it possible to know the absolute truth? Humans have always pursued truth. But every era, every culture, every individual interprets it differently. What was true yesterday can be refuted today. Truth seems to move with time, adapting to the gaze of the observer. Science progresses by discovering temporary truths, theories that work until a more precise one replaces them. Philosophy searches for eternal truths, but also stumbles upon the limits of language and perception. Perhaps truth is not a fixed goal, but a path under construction, a network of perspectives that intersect, contradict, and complement one another. Maybe the only absolute truth is that everything is changing, and accepting that is not surrendering to relativism, but opening oneself to a broader understanding. That reality is dynamic, infinite, and therefore inexhaustible. Is death the end or the beginning? Death is the great frontier we all share. Every culture has tried to explain it in its own way, as a passage, rebirth, or disappearance. Biology tells us that when the heart stops and the brain ceases to function, life ends. But matter does not die. It transforms. The atoms that compose us return to the earth, to the air, to the water. The energy that animated our body disperses, perhaps integrating into new forms. Some near-death experiences describe a light, a sense of peace, or total unity. Are they chemical illusions or glimpses of another dimension? No one knows. Perhaps consciousness, like energy, also transforms. And dying is not disappearing, but awakening into another form of existence. Death, more than an end, could be the doorway through which the universe continues telling its story through other voices. And what if all this were only a dream? Sometimes reality feels so fragile that it is difficult to distinguish it from a dream. What we believe firm can vanish with a thought, an emotion, or a revelation. What if this world, with its physical laws and history, were only a mental projection? Some philosophers, such as Descartes or ancient Buddhists, already suspected it. That reality could be an illusion, an experience shared by consciousnesses dreaming in unison. Quantum physics adds even more mystery. The observer influences what is observed, and reality seems to exist only when it's measured. Perhaps the universe is a gigantic mind dreaming itself, and we are fragments of that dream, dreaming within it. If that were true, then nothing is separate. The stars, the oceans, the trees, and we ourselves would be part of the same consciousness manifesting in infinite forms. An awakening would not mean ceasing to dream, but remembering that we were always the dream itself. We live surrounded by mysteries. Some we will solve with time, others will remain forever beyond our reach. But every question, every doubt, every thought is a spark that keeps the flame of knowledge alive. The universe does not owe us answers. We are the ones who owe it questions. Because as long as we keep asking, as long as we keep searching, we will continue to exist. And perhaps, deep down, that eternal curiosity is the true reason we are here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.